All right. The next question, which is something I didn't really think about too much until recently, but I think is very interesting. And the question is, what is Sephiroth doing when he merges worlds? He uses the phrase merging worlds, and then we sort of see it happen. And I think the answer is pretty simple, personally. The Whisper's utility was to adjust destiny to how the planet or how their boss saw fit. Sephiroth is now their boss, so now Sephiroth uses the Whispers to adjust reality to his liking by dipping his paintbrush in the palette that is the dreams in the lifestream. He has access to unlimited potential, and even though in Remake all the Whispers did was sort of physically adjust reality, like they fly over to Barrett and heal his wound, or they swarm Jessie and make her break her leg or whatever. But I guess in the hands of Sephiroth, he can now do a lot more with it, where he is able to basically be Freddy Krueger, pluck the nightmare, override reality with it, which will, a great example of that will be in the next question about the end of the game. But that's kind of my perspective on what Sephiroth means when he merges worlds. I think it's kind of a weird way to phrase it, but I think he's just taking all of the dark events and overriding reality with those events to make the perfect dark timeline, essentially. Which one do you want to go first?
Sounds good. Do you want me to?
No, you don't have to if you don't want to. I was just thinking to myself that I think we're gonna find ourselves in a very similar spot with this, but all of us.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Why don't you go for it? I think you can kind of probably sail this one because I think it's the one we're probably the most in agreement on.
Okay. Yeah. So I think one of the things that you've made sort of a correlation between like the Whisper. There is sort of a Whisper Harbinger aspect of like Sephiroth now. Also, just MJ Gallagher, shout outs to him, pointed out the similarities between the songs that are used between the mention of Rebirth and the Whisper Harbinger in remake soundtracks. So there is some correlation to this idea of like what Sephiroth is in that aspect. But the merging of worlds seems to be the converging point of realities. Meaning that as Sephiroth is merging those worlds in the way that we see him opening up the sky, the sort of one layer of reality kind of collapsing in on one, but in order to strengthen the lifespan of another. So Sephiroth is taking these strands of the life stream, turning them into and using the negative life stream, as I'm sure that we will learn more about at some other point, but it's essentially just Sephiroth's life stream, his world. He's transforming the strands of the life stream into essentially, just like you mentioned, a dark timeline-esque version to continuously push things forward unnaturally. But I also think that a part of it is also Sephiroth also coming together and sort of reforming himself. So there's like this weird thing that's happening at the same time with like the Outer Worlds also mentioning Jenova also included in the reunion in the Temple of the Ancients, where he kind of makes mention that he will bring both the worlds and his mother together. And the idea is that as the worlds are connecting, Jenova is also kind of becoming more whole, but also Sephiroth is also becoming whole. And there's a really good visual example of this at the end where all of the characters are starting fighting Rebirth Sephiroth, but all of them seemingly have an effect on just the one, even though they're not in the same plane of reality. So as the worlds are converging, Sephiroth is also becoming whole with all of these things as well. So there's always this great thing about Final Fantasy VII that I love so much is that there is a pure function of the worlds or a function of the planet that is perfectly mirrored by Sephiroth's presence. So as this is a function of the world, it also has this negative connotation to it that Sephiroth is sort of mirroring in some really twisted, awful way. So I think that kind of answers the question. Maybe I don't think I did it as much justice, but that's sort of where my brain sits on it.
So do you want me to answer, Josh?
Yeah.
Okay. To me, I think what he means in a literal sense is fairly nihilistic, which is just that he wants to consume all the worlds, and that is his concept of merging them, right? I do think there are layers to his motivations that involve loneliness. I do think that he does want, he wants at least one person with him, in this universe of loneliness, and that does seem to be Cloud. There does seem nothing that I'm reading from any of their interactions on that subject is that he is trying to trick him into being his partner, sailing the cosmos together. I do think he genuinely wants that. That's my read on that, but that's all subtextual. I think he's consuming all the worlds. He might leave Cloud around for reasons. It seems, maybe it's a rivalry thing. Maybe it's something else. Whatever it is, he probably needs him somehow. Maybe it's the infinite potential stuff. Whatever it is, though, I do think merging of worlds means that if Jenova, or he through Jenova, or Jenova through him, however their synergistic relationship works, is literally consuming these worlds, they mean that inside him these worlds are merging. And when Jenova Life Clinger, is a great, I think a really good localization for this, because I think it sort of recognizes what Genova's role is in this process, right? It's the wrong kind of immortalization, not through something cyclical, but through something, that consumes. So consumerism, versus, responsible use. It's just more of those Final Fantasy themes, dichotomized with each other, right? So that's the way that I see worlds merge. I think it's pretty simple.
I may reverse course just a little bit, because there's one thing about the Harbinger of Fate thing that I wanted to speak on, but
sure.
the internet conspired against me.
Right.
There was something interesting that BabySeal said that reminded me of something I heard on Prof Noctis's most recent podcast, where because it was about why defeat the Harbinger of Fate, and there was one thing that he said that he read from like a YouTube comment actually recently, where the live stream is essentially it controls reality, right? Like it's sort of and so like by disrupting the guardian, I guess, of reality, the guardian of the main live stream, it opens it up so that the memories of the core live stream that defines reality essentially can be altered, right? And talked about how Jenova seemingly messes with your conception of reality as an individual person, right? We saw that happen with Sephiroth. We've seen that happen with Cloud, obviously. And so what if Jenova, once the guardrails are taken off the prime live stream, could it influence and manipulate the memories of the planet itself, and in that case change reality as we know it? And so I thought that was an interesting thought, and perhaps the reason why the Harbinger of Fate had to be removed. And I guess it then plays into the question of what is the purpose of reuniting the worlds. And I think it's because Sephiroth and maybe Jenova together are trying to recreate the conditions of reality, and then bring it to a point that all of these sort of errant worlds, all of these like thoughts and dreams and whatever, that are astray in the life stream kind of get all brought together into one sort of new reality. The Sephiroth's own promised land, as the developers have talked about, they've talked about him wanting to create the promised land. And so him trying to create one final reality that he fully controls. And by reuniting all of the worlds, it ends them and ends all disparate possibilities of what could be, and puts it all into the final thing that he can impact. So I think that's the intention, is to break it all open so that he can bring it all back to the one thing that he wants and that he fully controls.
These are very interesting answers. It definitely makes me think there's that other element, that other variable that we're kind of waiting to be revealed. But I really like the idea of like Harbinger is more than just director of whispers. Like that, if that was one of its utility, one of its responsibilities, and that it's actually more of a guardian of the life stream's concept of predestination or whatever. I think that's pretty interesting. I was gonna say something else, but I forget what it is.
I can let you think about it. I can chime in for a second too. I do think that that's like Clark mentioned it, and Subtext also sort of was touching on it, is that there's a lot to be said about just Cloud and Sephiroth's relationship, but just knowing that in the future, Sephiroth sort of is bound to Cloud's memories in a very specific way. I do think that in a very twisted way, Sephiroth has a kinship to Cloud, because literally his memories are what keep him alive. And I think that in some very odd, sentimental way, there's like almost confusion in Sephiroth because of that concept. But we even see him in the live stream kind of guarding these memories in the Tifa live stream sequence. So I think for me, and going off of what Subtext said, I think that what Sephiroth ultimately wants is for like Cloud to forget exactly who he is, so that Sephiroth can kind of just, do what he wants to do to sort of convince him of his reality and the reality that he wants. Mm-hmm. And that definitely hinges also on him believing it, so that he can also create it and manifest it. I do think that kind of starts with Cloud, though. So I think off of Subtext's point is that I do think that Sephiroth is going to, like we know in the third act of Final Fantasy VII OG, start to target specifically these memories of Cloud and his perception of reality. And that will ultimately kind of be the inception of what eventually gets Sephiroth what he wants. And also there's a line of dialogue that was taken away from the OG, like sort of hinting at the fact that what he wants is that sort of singularity, that oneness with all of the life stream to be dictated, sort of God, basic I want to be God mentality, but how that works and manifests in Seven's world is very different, I think, which we've kind of seen. So
I remember what I was going to say. I was just going to sort of bring it into a thematic direction for a second, which is pretty obvious, but regardless of the logic of all of this, of how it happened, why it happened, etc., with the Harbinger and Destiny and stuff, it was really a thematic inciting incident that quite literally just unlocked the potential of human will, which is the most Final Fantasy, and especially Final Fantasy 16 theming that you can have. Like, defeating God with the power of friendship is really just a funny way of saying human will compounded into itself can accomplish crazy goals, such as stopping global warming / the planet being destroyed. And so no matter what is going on with all of this, the ultimate thematic purpose of everything is that Cloud, when he comes into his true self and through the power of the support of everyone around him, they will be able to thematically dip into these worlds of untapped human will potential and use that as a possible literal white weapon to defeat the odds that be. And I think personally that's what's thematically going on with the entire inciting incident of this trilogy, which is defeating destiny and then having untapped potential to do whatever you want with.